So we have a lot to talk about concerning the OSRS market. As many of you know, a few days ago, Jagex implemented a grand exchange tax, and that has had a profound effect on the old school RuneScape economy. Item prices are so volatile right now, not only because there is now a tax on everything, but also because of the new item sync. So many items have shot up in value by 50% or more, and there's a lot we need to unpack. Anyway, let's get started. Now, on December 9th, we probably got one of the biggest updates the Grand Exchange has ever seen, and that was the Grand Exchange tax. Now, all of the gold being taxed from the Grand Exchange is either going to act as a gold sink and just straight up be deleted, or some of that money will also be used to buy items directly from the Grand Exchange and delete those, so some money will be reinfused and transferred for items. Now, of these two systems, probably the more noticeable one right now is the item sync. Now, Jagex did actually reveal a list of around 30 items that are going to be bought off the Grand Exchange and sunk. These are mostly high-end PVM items from the God Wars dungeon, raids, and a few other Slayer bosses. So we know that these items are going to eventually become more scarce. We don't know at what rate, that's still unknown. For all we know, Jagex might only be buying like one Untitled chest plate off the Grand Exchange, for example, every day, which wouldn't really have a very notable effect. So although we don't know those numbers yet, there is still a ton of speculation in the market trying to guess how much an item sync will affect each item. So for example, here we have the Bandos God Sword. So we have before the GE tax on the left, and we have a marker for GE tax, and on the right is post tax. So just in one day, the Bandos God Sword went from around 9 mil up to 14 mil at its peak. So an increase of 5 mil or like 40 or 50% in a single day. That is massive. Now, another item on the list we have here is the Zamorakian Spear, which went from around 14 or 15 mil up to a peak of nearly 20 mil. One item that actually shot up a lot more than I thought was actually the Toxic Blowpipe. That item is on the list to be sunk as well, and the Toxic Blowpipe went from around 2.7 mil up to 3.7, so a mil increase on the Blowpipe. Pretty significant, considering there's a ton of them in the game. Now, another big one here we have is the Harmonized Orb, which before the tax was 630 mil. As soon as the update dropped, it bumped it up by around 130 mil just in a day, which is pretty crazy. Now here we have the Scythe. Now, although the list was revealed back in November, the Scythe wasn't actually on it. That's actually one of the few items they added between November and December. So although players were speculating that it might get added because the Scythe had been going up in price, nobody knew for sure. So as soon as the update dropped, it went from 485 mil up to 590 mil, so 110 mil increase. So pretty well on all of the named items, there was a gigantic price increase. But in a lot of cases, it peaked in the first day and has since then started to decline. For example, the Harmonized Orb, sure it did peak at 760 mil, but it has fallen by 100 mil in a subsequent week. Same with the Scythe, it peaked at around 600 mil, but now it's back down to 530 mil. Very similar story with the Twisted Bow, going from like 900 mil up to nearly a bill again, but has since fallen back down. So what exactly does that mean? Well, I think that means that most of the day one and, well, week one price increase is purely hype. Now, I think we can make one big assumption here that I think is probably true. Jagex is going to be very conservative with how they start this new item sync system. For example, the Bandos God Sword, they're not going to be syncing 100 Bandos God Swords a day to start with. They're probably going to start with a few just to make sure it works, and then they're going to ramp it up over time. So right now there's obviously a ton of speculation, but I doubt there's enough scarcity being created by the new item sync yet to be really pushing much upward right now, and that's why I think a lot of items are falling back down in value. We're obviously going to have to wait much longer to really feel the long-term impact of the new item sync. Now, although some items had a massive increase and then a violent fall off, not everything is like that. Quite a few items have jumped up in price and kind of either plateaued or in some cases have continued to go upwards. Now, these are mostly items that not only are getting affected by this item sync, but also might be being affected by a future update. For example, we have the Bandos Tassets. Now, these are being affected by two major updates. The Grand Exchange tax, which is going to generally sync some of them. But on top of that, Nex is also affecting this item directly via its own item sync, and these two factors together are pushing the price up further than many of the other items. Now, taking a step back here, what exactly is Jagex's ultimate goal with this item sync? Well, they want to keep prices more stable and to help retain value in a lot of these iconic pieces of equipment. So is the goal to stabilize the price at where it is now and try not to let it fall further? Is the goal to push the prices back upwards in some cases? And what do they think is a fair price for each item? Those are questions that we might not get answers to, but let's take the orbital chest plate for example. So looking at this briefly, you could say that, okay, it was at 30 mil before the GE tax, it jumped up to 40 mil, and now it's falling in value. Maybe the item sync isn't really affecting things at all. But if we pull back the timeline further here and look back at the all-time price history, the highest this item has ever been is 48 mil, and that was back nearly 3 years ago. Well, I think many would argue that's a fair price already. That's pretty much what the price has been roughly around for the entire item's history, at least back till 2017. Personally, I don't think Jagex's goal is to push items higher than they've ever been before, more so just to retain a consistent and fair value. So if over the last 5 years that's been somewhere between 30 and 40 mil, then maybe that's where it should be. And I think that's why it hasn't really gone up past that. Next up here we have the Bandos chest plate. If we look back at the last 4 or 5 years, it's roughly been around 15 to 20 mil for most of its history. Right now it's worth 26 mil, so kind of on the high end. And probably one of the most obvious examples is, look at the orbital crossbow. I mean, it's almost double what it's normally been throughout all of OSRS's history, or at least back the last 4 or 5 years. There is no doubt in my mind that these measures have been effective in their ultimate goal of pushing prices upwards. Whether or not you think that is a good thing, it has certainly been effective. Now, one thing I was incredibly curious about regarding the Grand Exchange tax is how the item volume would be affected by the tax. So I kind of came over here into GE Tracker, went down to look at the volume, and yes, there is a noticeable drop off in volume when the tax is implemented, but really the story here that I actually wasn't really considering is how much the dual arena removal or dual arena restrictions affected volume. In most cases, it affected it significantly more. For example, here we have the Twisted Bow. Leading up to the dual arena removal, there was around 500 bought and sold every day. The day it's removed, it drops almost in half. I really didn't expect a volume drop of that proportion, but clearly, because of staking, so many items transferred hands all the time, which I think added in a lot of transactions. So with that out of the way, volume was cut significantly day to day. Now, the Grand Exchange tax also did have a significant effect as well. In this case, it looks like a fairly similar amount. So after the dual arena removal, the daily amount dropped to around 250 or 300 a day. After the Grand Exchange tax, it dropped to around 250 or 300, down by another 30 or 40%. So yeah, there's no doubt that the volume on the Grand Exchange is significantly less, but that's really thanks to 2 big updates. Looking at another kind of expensive item here, we have the Scythe, which before the update was around 350 traded every day, immediately dropped in half, and then after the tax dropped another 20 or 30%. Looking at the Elysian, this one is hilarious. Leading up to the tax, there's 200 roughly bought and sold every day. After the tax, drops to 60 the next day. Just a huge drop in volume on the Elysian. I guess that's a very popular item. It's a stake at the dual arena, I'm not sure. Never been there. Evens out at around 70 or 80 traded per day, and then drops to 40 or 50. So lower trade volume, of course, creates larger margins. So that is in part why right now we have such big margins on all items. Now, as I touched on in the last video I made, the tax is having a significant effect on how margins are determined on the Grand Exchange. In pretty much all cases, the spread between the buy and sell price simply grew by 1%. So here we have the Scythe, which has a margin of almost 6 mil. 5 mil of that is all just taxed money, essentially, and 900K is the profit. So we have a perfect storm of a tax, which is going to create larger margins, and because of the tax, we have less volume, and thanks to the dual arena, we have less volume. So I think now we have a ton of hype and a ton of updates. We have next, we have Raids 3 coming out, but after that, when some of the hype dies down, you could get absolutely robbed just buying and selling a item like a Scythe on the Grand Exchange. So anyway, regardless of all this, I am so excited to see what happens. I'm going to be trying some flipping. We're going to see how that goes. I mean, there's tons of opportunity. I mean, I just opened up the Bow of Ferdinand, 5 mil profit. That's crazy. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Now, before I go here, I want to give a giant thank you to all of my members over on YouTube. Thank you so much to Alejandra, Sejuani's Flail, Ocelot, and Kush Patel for all being subscribed at the Dragon tier. Thank you so much as always, guys. Also, a giant thank you to Sir Rojas, Ryan Shady, Mexos, Base Titch, NDM001, and Yo-Yo Sub 89 for all being subscribed at the Runite tier. Appreciate it, guys. As always, if you are looking for another way to support the channel, becoming a YouTube member is a great way to support me directly. You'll get immortalized in all of my future videos, get a custom role in my Discord server, and you get access to my video release schedule as well. Thanks again, and I will see you next time.